Hi, this is going to be my commentary, my GDQ commentary for my submission for AGDQ 2018 for Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped on the Insane Trilogy HD remake. I'm going to be commentating live over my PB video. The main reason for this is that the top 3 runners of this category, any percent, are submitting this run as a race, and so likely we'll be focusing during our runs and having someone else commentate live. I am going to do this in one take though. I've obviously seen this run because I performed this run, but I haven't really watched it back or anything, so this should still be pretty off the cuff and more or less what you would see in a real run if you were to accept a solo run instead of a race. So without further ado, let's get going. You're going to hear my voice and the game audio pretty quietly. Unfortunately, I didn't have a recording with just the game audio, and I'm a little pressed for time now. I was trying to lower my time as best I could right before submissions, but I want to make sure I get it in there a few hours before for you guys, and so that's what we're going to have to roll with. So sorry if you hear me talking over myself a little bit. Anyways, the game starts off with a couple of load screens here, but the coolest thing happens, not the coolest thing, but one of the cool things happen immediately at the beginning of the run. You actually pick up Coco here. Coco was added in the Insane Trilogy as a more or less fully playable character to all 3 of the games. And in Crash 1 and 2, she's not actually useful to pick up. She just wastes time. She just takes time to grab, and she can't do certain levels, which causes these slow animations. But you want to grab her in Crash 3 because we can actually do some cool animation skips with her when we need to go into levels that are Coco only. The first level here that you're seeing is Under Pressure. This is one of the 2 underwater levels we're going to be doing throughout this run. And the underwater levels are notoriously difficult for a lot of casual players and stuff. And for the speedrun, they're actually very, very interesting because they're incredibly cycle-based and have a very basic but powerful movement tech of using a spin and then canceling that with flipper kicks. You can see that I'm using a watercraft here as well that gives you a nice powerful boost. And now we're going to be seeing a lot more of these spins canceled with flipper kicks over and over, and that lets you carry the speed a bit further. I actually pass the second watercraft here because it's been timed out that it's faster to skip the watercraft if you can manage to make it without getting hit by the shark or anything. And so there we go. That's the end of that level. I unfortunately went past the warp zone a little bit. That can happen. And yeah, so the main way that this run works is we need to collect 25 crystals, 1 from each level, and beat 5 bosses, Cortex being the last one. It's pretty much the same in terms of, the format and everything from Crash 3 on the PlayStation 1. However, this version of the game has some pretty drastically different mechanics. Crash 3 on PS1 is all based around neutral slide jumping and stuff, whereas this run has some really cool movement tech that we pick up at the end of Warp 3. And before then, we can't do some neutral slide jumping and stuff, but we can just continue to do these slide spins. Now, one of the big things about the routing for this category is routing around triple masks or just damage boosts with the masks in general. See, Aku Aku, the little partner there with you, will effectively let you take 1 extra hit. Otherwise, normally you would die instantly. So if if I'm saying like, well, we route this run around these masks, why did I just skip a couple mask boxes in this pretty basic first level? Well, the reason being that when you actually go into the invincibility form that you get from picking up 3 masks, it takes about 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, something like that, to do an animation before it lets you start moving again. And you aren't any faster when you're slide spinning in the invulnerability form than you are when you're normally slide spinning. So high level runners will avoid triple mask in cases where it won't actually save them any time. And it turns into some interesting like corner cutting and makes for some riskier levels because you're not invulnerable, but a little bit faster by that 1 second or 2 seconds. We go into Boneyard after Toad Village. Our main goal of Toad Village normally is to pick up 1 mask, but I carried 1 from Under Pressure. Now our our main goal, I say main goal, but really secondary goal. Our main goal is to go fast in each level. But we kind of have secondary goals in a lot of levels, especially the platforming ones. And in this one, it's to pick up a second mask. So I'm going to be doing my best to go quickly. I'm unfortunately going to do a body slam right there, apparently. And that would explain why I have 3 seconds to save in this level. And one of the other kind of small pieces of movement tech is that whenever I need to jump over a barrier, instead of doing a high jump, I'm going to try to do a low jump. Even though that means that I might not be sliding, it's going to be a little bit faster. So here we go. I pick up my second mask, and this is somewhere that we thought triple mask was faster for a while. However, it turns out that it's actually just 1 second slower to have to wait on that animation, despite the fact that you can cut some corners and go over some lava. There's another example of slide spinning and then jumping onto the log instead of slide jumping over the log. And that just gives us, it allows us to start sliding again more quickly, because during these early warps, the fastest available form of movement to us is our slide, and the only reason we spin at the end of it is to just get into another slide faster while still moving. Otherwise, if we just slid without spinning, we would pause for, you know, a quarter of a second, half second, and that spin lets us keep moving just a little bit while we're waiting to start up our next slide. So we're coming up to the end of this level here. Just a lot of memorizing the layout and everything, and I got a little stuck at the end, I guess, but out of the warp and or into the warp portal rather, not too bad. So now we're going back into the time twister. This is our, you know, our hub world. We've been in it a few times already, and we're going to be going to our first Coco level, and you're going to see immediately why we picked up Coco instead of letting the game just switch us to Coco. So we're going to walk into this corner and switch characters as we're entering the warp zone. And this is really cool. The warp portal, rather. This is really cool because normally what happens if you're Crash and you're trying to go in a Coco level is you're going to run into the portal, and he's going to do a belly flop, and Coco's going to jump over him. Or if you're standing still, not in the warp, you know, towards the warp portal, and you switch characters, it's going to lock all your inputs and play an animation. However, if we run into the portal and swap characters at the same time, it skips the animation there. It's super cool. Now we're in a jet ski level. There are 2 of these throughout the run. A lot of people sometimes think that some of these levels are really gimmicky, or they don't get it because it's not platforming. However, there's some really cool movement tech in pretty much every single one of these different types of levels. As you can see here, I'm constantly moving left and right, and can even get a little bit queasy if you're if you're not all that fond of like motion sickness kind of things. And this actually saves a little bit of time over the entire course of the level. It's about 0.3 seconds or so for this level, but it'll save even more for a later level. The other thing is that you saw me damage boost twice. That's why I was collecting those masks throughout the first 3 platforming levels. I really wanted to make sure that I could take 2 damage boosts in this level, as well as hit these ramps very low, so that I'm not fully jumping off of the ramp, but I'm still getting a little boost off of it. So now we're coming up to the end of this level here. Again, just a lot of zigzagging back and forth. We're not really sure exactly why it's faster, but it just kind of is. And now next we're going to be coming up to our second Coco level and the final one of Warp 1, and that the final level of Warp 1, that is. And that's Orient Express. Orient Express is a tiger level, a Pura level. Now the cool thing about these tiger levels is that they are very immediately fast, or immediately obvious that they're fast. The tiger Pura has a boost that you can hold down, and the game, you know, normally intends for you to hold down the boost for kind of straighter segments and stuff like that, and kind of take it slow around a lot of the obstacles. However, in you know, in a speed run, if we know what we're doing, we can hold down boost throughout the entire level. There's not a single spot where we need to release it. One of the other things I'm doing is I'm trying to stay on the ground and run as much as possible. I'm not 100% sure, this hasn't been confirmed yet, but it seems to be a little bit faster, as well as jumping around some of these obstacles if I can do so without having to, you know, completely cross over the entire level and potentially waste time. There's that crystal grab there, the 5th one out of the 25 that we need. And I'm just cutting every corner I possibly can here, and we're already basically done with this level. every one of these levels, there's one more that we're going to be doing in the run. Ends with a cute little animation of Coco hugging Purah, which is, of course, always adorable. Okay, so we're coming up to our first boss now. Tiny Tiger. And the first boss, he's pretty simple. We're really, you just have to hit him 3 times, and there's a phase in between where he'll cause you to have to dodge some lions and stuff. And however, again, we have to switch back to Crash because all of the bosses except for one can only be fought with Crash. But there is a cool thing about this fight. Back in the original PlayStation 1 version, there was a little spot you could stand in this fight during the tiger sections or the tiger phases that was completely immune. It was, you know, a little cheese spot. And it's right in this top left corner here. And the developers, Vicarious Visions, actually left that spot in and made the crowd throw cheese at you, which is unbelievably cool. I love it. It's a fun little Easter egg and a very creative way for them to leave in a little bit of an exploit. Now, the other thing you might be wondering, like, okay, well, that makes this fight way too easy. Yeah, it's pretty easy, but it's very fast. And even if we weren't using this cheese spot, you can spin the tigers away. You don't have to actually dodge all of them. And so that just, it really makes it easy anyways. Honestly, a lot of the boss fights, not even a lot of the boss fights in this run, but like 2 of the boss fights in this run are decent chances for donation reading. This is probably one where I would explain the cheese spot and then maybe let it go to donations throughout the end of the fight and the load screen. The only thing notable at the end there is I tried to make sure that the power-up that fell, the upgraded body slam, I tried to make sure it fell right on Crash, just to save fractions of a second. So now we need to move from Warp 1 to Warp 2. One of the unfortunate quirks about this game is that if you're right up against a wall, sometimes the game will eat your inputs or buffer them a bit weirdly. So sometimes you may see the movement kind of go awry when I end up running into a wall, and that's what happened just there. I'm also kind of losing my voice, so I apologize if it like dies during this recording, but we'll do our best. Now we're in the Midnight Run. This is the second and final Purah level of the any % run. Again, the name of the game is Cutting Corners. I'm going to try to hug the inside track of every single turn that I possibly can, as well as skipping checkpoints whenever, you know, they're going to be out of my way. As you can see, I'm hugging these left sides, and now I'm moving to the right, specifically there because there was that large pit. But I'm going to move to the right again, jump over the pit, and having to move left to hug this next left turn. It's a lot of zigzagging back and forth and really minor, you know, frames being saved here and there. And then we do a nice little run all the way off the cliff to get that last crystal, which is a nice little suspenseful moment sometimes. Alright, with the Purah levels done, they're 2 of the easiest levels to probably like take a random death on, but they're also 2 of the simplest levels. They don't really have a ton of tech to them. It's just hold, boost, and go. But we're all done with them now. We're in Warp 2, and we're about to come up to the first motorcycle level. This is Hog Ride. Now, once again, we're going to switch to Crash real quick. I just kind of want to point it out because I feel like I didn't beforehand point out well enough. Watch here. We're going to switch characters and enter the warp at the same time. Super cool. Saves about like 2 seconds or so each time you do it. 16 seconds or so over the course of the run. Anyways, we're coming into our first motorcycle level, Hog Ride. You might think, oh, it's a motorcycle level, it's a racing level. What can we really do to speed this up much? Well, the cool thing is that we can actually run off the track sometimes, as you can see here, to save, you know, shave tiny little bits of time off on each corner. But also there's an incredibly difficult strat in this specific level where you can carry this boost that I've got going on all the way to the end of the level. Now, unfortunately, I don't get it here in my PB, but you have to sneak that boost in between the enemy racer and the cop car, and it's incredibly precise. It turns this into one of the most difficult levels in the early game, despite the fact that it's, you know, kind of just a simple racing level. It's also a very short level. So we're going to do our best to get that in any kind of, you know, GDQ scenario. Other nice little things, you could skip a couple of the final boost pads there and just continue to carry the first boost. And there we go, we got our crystal. So up next we have GWiz, and as I mentioned before, with a lot of the platforming levels, we kind of have secondary goals that we have for these levels. Our primary goal is to go fast, you know, not make any mistakes. Our secondary goal is again to pick up masks, but in GWiz we're specifically trying to pick up 2 masks. The main reason for this is that we're going to need 3 masks in Hang 'em High, the next level, and Hang 'em High only has 1 mask in it, and it's incredibly crucial that we get the triple mask in that level. So we're going to do our best in GWiz to keep both masks, but we also don't want to slow down anywhere, so we're going to be kind of scarily jumping off over pits and dodging these frogs and stuff like that, and basically trying to never stop sliding. You'll note that I'm jumping onto the sides of the stage a lot, and the main reason for that is that if I need to jump over something, like I said before, I want to try to land on high ground so I can start sliding immediately. So again, for example, I need to jump over this pit, so we're going to jump up onto the railing on the right, so that way we don't have to fall all the way to the ground before we can slide again. So now we're going to try to knock that frog into the TNT to take care of the goat. We didn't manage to do it, but we did manage to not take any damage, and we got our second mask. So now we've got 2 masks, and we need to keep both of these for the rest of the level without taking any damage, and for most of the level of Hang 'em High. Again, jumping onto the sides whenever possible in order to really reduce the time in the air where I'm not sliding. This ending part can get a bit scary, but luckily I was able to take out the nitro and the enemy by spinning away the goat there. And to note, you can do these levels in each warp in any order, but you only unlock the levels for the next warp once you beat the boss of the previous warp. So we're going to go into Hang 'em High next. If I had messed up in GWiz and lost a mask, I would most likely do Tomb Time next, because there is 1 more mask in there I could grab. There's actually 2, but there's only 1 along the way. And that would allow me to then still get the 3rd mask invulnerability in Hang 'em High. So you can do a little bit of on-the-fly routing sometimes, and especially in a race scenario, you may see that come up. So we're going to try to do some fast bouncing off of the trampolines. That was pretty good. Could have been a bit better because you can skip the 3rd one. And now we're going to be coming up onto this triple mask, and you're going to see why we need this. Your monkey bar, you know, climbing is super fast with triple mask. It's unbelievably faster than it normally is. So it saves a lot of time in this level to be able to make sure that you have triple mask. I'm going to move as far as I possibly can throughout this monkey bar section with the triple mask, and lately I've even actually been able to get further than that. Now I took a damage boost there intentionally on that scorpion, because if I had to spin him, I would stop, because whenever you need to spin on the you know, the climbing sections, the monkey bar sections, you have to actually come to a complete stop, and I don't need triple mask in Tomb Time. I only need a couple masks coming out of it. So a little bit of nice platforming at the end to get around and over some enemies, and we're out of that level. So that was a pretty solid level. In fact, it was a gold split at the time. It's not anymore. I'm going to keep drinking water periodically throughout this, so sorry for the breaks. Alright, so we're coming up to Tomb Time next. And as I said, this is not a level where we care about having triple mask. However, this level does include one of the hardest strats in the first 2 warps. The carrying the boost pad in Hog Ride is one of them, and then this is the other one. It's hard to say which is the harder of the 2. Probably the one in Hog Ride, but not by much. So we're going to be doing Tomb Time here. It's going to start out the same as a lot of the other platforming levels. Slide, spin, slide, spin, slide, spin. But we're introduced to these alligators. They can actually be really problematic. Their hitboxes are quite awful. Now, the other thing is we're also introduced to oil here, and oil has a, you know, ice kind of mechanic to it. It lets you slide on it, And it turns out that if you actually go neutral after using a slide input while you're on the oil, you'll carry that speed a little bit further. So a lot of the times you'll see me kind of just sliding and putting a little pause between each slide. That's actually to make sure that I'm going neutral and carrying that speed a little bit. So now, ever since that door just opened, I'm on a timer more or less here. I'm trying to race my way all the way, all the way to this spot here so that I can go for a jump. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to because of that flood back there. But had I been fast enough, I would have been able to go for a very large jump there, a very scary jump. And it's incredibly difficult, but it saves you about 2 seconds or so. So most of the top runners do go for it now. Incredibly risky to go for, but then we finish off the level with some moving platforms and a hill, and there we go. We're out of tomb time. Now we're already done with the first 2 warps, you know, done in 20 minutes, other than the second boss, Dingodile. And Dingodile may be the fastest boss in this run. I believe he is. Similar to Tiny Tiger, there was an exploit for this boss that the developers actually left in this version of the game. See, one of the things I've done throughout this run so far are these things called glitched high jumps. And that's something where you slide and then jump to do a high jump. And you also spin at the same time that you jump or shortly after it. And it gets you a little bit higher. And it turns out that with Dingodile, they left this in from the original game. You can get just high enough to get over the crystals here. So normally you're supposed to wait on Dingodile to do this long animation before he starts shooting the crystals down with a flamethrower, but instead we can just jump right over him. I do also have to wait a little bit after each hit before going for the next one, because the boss actually is not available to be hit right away. Okay, and with Dingodile done, we now have double jump, which will come in handy occasionally, especially during some climbing sections in platforming levels. But first up, we got Dynamite next. Now, this is another level where we're going to want triple mask. And because of that, if I didn't take 2 masks from... looks like I pressed on the wrong button there for a moment. If I didn't take 2 masks from the previous warp, then I would actually save Dynamite until last in warp 3. Luckily, in this specific case, I'm able to do it first. Again, the order of the levels is really just up to your masks. How many masks you have and everything like that. Okay, so now we've got our triple mask here. This will allow us to slide right over fire pits and stuff, and go through these band of fishes. So the band of fishes are one of the main reasons we want this triple mask here. They're incredibly obnoxious. If they're spinning, you cannot kill them unless you're invulnerable. If you try to slide into them, they'll bounce you backwards. It's incredibly annoying. So you have to actually wait for them to finish spinning, or you have to jump over them. They also track you left and right, so very, very difficult to deal with if you don't have that invulnerability. One of the other things I just did is I passed right by a dino, and you can see I'm passing by him again. That's Baby T. Unfortunately for us, Baby T is actually slower by 1 second in this level, which is the only level he appears in the any % run, and so we have to unfortunately leave Baby T. And sometimes that causes you to lose a mask, like what just happened right there. That is not something that I wanted to happen, but it's also not something that is necessarily punishing. So we're going to take it a bit safer on this nitro because I'm down to 1 mask. I do need this 1 mask. It's incredibly crucial. We've got Deep Trouble up next, which is the hardest level in the run, and we need to enter it with at least 1 mask. We ideally want to enter it with 2 for safety, but we have to enter it with at least 1 mask. So the rest of this level is just about memorizing the layout, minimizing your jumping compared to sliding, and trying not to lose any masks.
On top of the selecting the wrong level before. It's not a complete boss skip, but it makes the boss insanely fast. And yeah, the remaster looks beautiful.
Alright, so we've got Deep Trouble up next. Like I said, this is the hardest level in the run. It's the second underwater level, similar to the very first level of the run. And the thing that makes this incredibly difficult is just how unbelievably cycle based it is. All the cycles in this game are global cycles, more or less. There's only a few that aren't. And the global cycle starts from the second the level loads in. So all of that timing of like waiting on that warp animation to load into the level, that affects your cycles, which means that if you ever die, you're not going to see that animation and all your cycles are going to be different. So we're going to be timing all of our cycles from right there when we go past that fan. So now we're on an intense timer. We got to do everything very precisely. I have to hit that mask box in order to get the second mask. I got slowed down a little bit by one of those turbines, so that's unfortunate. And it may affect how well we're going to be able to go through these next cycles. I was able to take care of both those sharks, and I got slowed down by the turbine again, but I'm still carrying both my masks. Now, because I got slowed down by both turbines, I wasn't able to make that cycle, and I had to use a mask there. I'm going to use a second mask right here, but I do get a little bit of a boost from the turbine, so it does help a little bit. Now we're going to use the watercraft again, and we're going to actually damage boost with this watercraft pretty soon. We're going to get rid of this nitro, and then we're coming up to the last turbines in the level, and so we damage boost with the watercraft, and we're out of there. Incredibly crazy level, and that wasn't even perfect, but it was pretty close. It was only a couple seconds off of being perfect. That level is absolutely difficult. It's the hardest one in the run. And if you lose too many masks, you unfortunately are just sitting there and waiting on so many turbine cycles. And it just costs a lot of time. So now after that, we're going into Road Crash. This is the second of the three motorcycle levels in this run. Road Crash is probably, in a speed run, I would say the easiest of the three. It's not easy by any means. In fact, for most people casually, it's the most difficult of the three throughout the normal run. But in this specific case, there's not much we can really do to speed it up other than just cutting every corner we possibly can, taking every inside track of the turns, and really trying to avoid the enemies. So I slowed down there a bit, which is really unfortunate. It means we're having a bad time so far. We should already be past this 6th place racer, and then we also hit the back of his car. So really not having a great time in this level so far. Now, the other one thing to note about these motorcycle levels is that the enemy racers are on a set pattern. They will go more or less the same speed, and they will move the same way in each section. But if you bump into the back of them, you'll slow down and they'll get lunged forward like that, and it can cause you to fall in pits. Now, you can't die in the motorcycle levels, but you will not get the crystal if you do not come in first. So they can be quite stressful. Now, we have a little bit of an intentional slowdown during this S bend here, and that actually avoids us having to slow down anywhere else in that turn, so it really helps out a lot. One of the other thing about these boost pads is that as soon as you hit a ramp with the boost pad, or as soon as you land from a ramp, you lose your boost. So a lot of the times, especially in the last motorcycle level, you want to avoid ramps once you have these boosts. Ooh, I got a very, very close boost around that guy there. And now we just got to pass this 1st place racer, but the race is almost over. And luckily for us, there's one more boost pad, and this enemy racer is going to be a bit nice and give us just enough of a berth to be able to pass him and grab the crystal. All right. So now we're done with the quote-unquote gimmick levels of this warp. Deep Trouble and Road Crash. We're going to go into 2 more platforming levels to finish it out. The first of which is Double Header. Now, this is the last of the 3 medieval style levels. This is probably one of the coolest like level themes in the game, in my opinion. And I'm always bummed that there aren't more of them. But this one's actually kind of difficult because they introduce these 2-headed enemies that are swinging gigantic, like, just hunks of meat, and they take up a lot of room. They take up a wide area, and their swings can have some very obnoxious hitboxes sometimes. So You have to work your way around them, as well as making sure that you keep the one mask that you pick up at the start of the level. You can see I already have that Aku Aku mask, and I need to keep this mask all the way until the second level of the next warp room, ideally. Now we'll see if I do manage to do that in this run or not in this video. There are ways to recover if you don't. However, it's incredibly useful to be able to keep this mask that long. There is one more mask in high time, and we're going to be picking that one up as well, but we're going to have to use that mask pretty shortly after high time, and you'll see why as that's coming up. So again, we're using the edges of, we're using these walls, the edges of the arena a bit, in order to skip some of the, dangerous obstacles on the course, but as well as just round these corners as tightly as possible. We're going to jump onto the wall here at the end again, and just to be able to get around that last two-headed guy. You can just go right past the two-headed guy and like jump over the pit, but I've had that kill me so many times, or at least lose a mask from getting hit by the two-headed enemy, so we decided to kind of go around there. Alright, now we go into high time. I love the way Roach describes this level. This level just makes your stomach drop just a little bit every single time you come up to it. Good run, bad run, whatever. This level, it's like just a pit in your stomach. It's always just an uneasy feeling. It's a very difficult level, and there are lots of reasons for that. Some of it is that fire that happens, but also that you need to make a lot of these carpet cycles that are moving vertically. Vertical movement in this game, once you have double jump, becomes really cool. However, at the same time, if you're up against a wall, the game will eat your double jump inputs, like I was saying earlier about how it just in general will eat some inputs. So we also have to deal with these scorpions, which causes us to stop on the monkey bars in order to spin them away, and we have to make sure we don't lose any masks. Just an awful level all around. Actually a very cool one, but a very hard one. So now we're going to wait on this fire a little bit. Ideally, you don't have to wait on it at all, but is a bit safer to do so because the hitbox for it is pretty tall. So now we're trying to do this climbing section as fast as we can. We've got the two masks that we need. We want to make sure we leave this level with both of them. Accidentally fell on that TNT there. Definitely not what you want to see. We're going to jump over that monkey enemy because he can be incredibly difficult to avoid sometimes. And now we're going to jump right under that scorpion and make our way through. So I think we hit most of the carpet cycles that we wanted to hit in that level. There is a slightly faster one that we unfortunately couldn't get. But it's something we will definitely go for in a GDQ kind of scenario. Alright, so now we're coming up to Dr. Entropy, the third boss of the run, and the coolest boss in the trilogy, in my opinion. The strat for this boss is unbelievable. So I mentioned earlier that we have the glitched high jump that gives us just a little bit more height. Well, that also will equate to a little bit more distance when used over a gap. So here we're going to do a long slide, glitched high jump into a double jump, and that lets us skip the entire first phase. We then immediately have to do it back the other direction in order to prepare to skip the second phase. And right here, we're able to get that second hit in really early. Ordinarily, Entropy will do these laser attacks. So now we've set ourselves up very precisely. We're going to jump over one clock, slide out into the open void, and get hit by the second clock, losing a mask, but activating an auto jump feature of the game whenever you take damage. And then we're going to double jump out of that, and we're able to finish off the fight so quickly that I couldn't even explain it all in time. Very, very cool run, or very cool strat, rather. And it's even faster than the original PlayStation 1 version, I'm almost certain, as you can hit him a bit earlier than normal. It's crazy. And now, the best thing is that we got the most broken piece of movement in this run from that boss, after I pressed the wrong switches a couple times. We got the Death Tornado Spin. Now, the Death Tornado Spin leads us to be able to do these awesome things called Mock Tornadoes, or Abdullahs, or Death Metal Tornadoes, however you want to call them. death metal cyclones, I think I heard Kizaron say. And they lead to some really cool movement tech. You got to see a little bit of one there, but we'll see it more in the next level, Sphinxinator. Now, first though, Tell No Tales. This is the second jet ski level of this run. Now, this level, don't let it fool you, despite some of these large expanses of open water. It's actually incredibly difficult. It's one of the longest levels in the run, and on top of that, the fastest way to do this level involves skipping every single checkpoint. And you need to collect that mask that we just did and not lose a single mask throughout the entire level. Crazy difficult, and requires a lot of really precise movement, including this back and forth, you know, spin slaloming that we've been doing throughout both the jet ski levels. Again, this saves only a little bit of time here and there, but like it really adds up over the course of a level as long as this one. So now we need to make sure we don't get hit by this boat here, and it turns out you can actually dip under the oars. And so I try to make sure I always do that so that way I don't lose one of the masks. Again, we're going to want triple mask in the next level, Sphinxinator. So now we're heading up to the next boat. These cannonballs are the worst. They're the hardest part of these levels. Luckily, I got a pretty good cycle there. Lately, I've been getting even faster, and unfortunately, it's made that cycle a bit harder. We're going to go for a super fast crystal grab here. Worst crystal hitbox in the run, and luckily we were able to pick it up there pretty quickly. So, again, the name of the game is trying not to slow down at all. We got a little bit stuck there in between the ramp, but from here on out, we're pretty safe. It's really, once we got that crystal, we're fairly safe. Looks like I had to slow down a little bit at the end here, just a bit of erroneous movement, but in general, we were able to be okay. And now we've got 2 masks, and we get to go into Sphinxinator, and this is really cool because Sphinxinator is another one of the hardest levels in the run. Warp 4 is just a gauntlet. It's just unrelenting pain in game form, and it is also incredibly fun because we all know us speedrunners like to punish ourselves when it comes to speed tricks and stuff. So Sphinxinator is another level that is that has some heavy global cycles that we need to really go as fast as possible in order to beat. There's going to be these large doors that kind of work as crushers, opening and closing on a global cycle. And here is the best movement in the game, the Mach Tornado. You start up a death tornado spin while sliding, jump off the ground, and then land back on the ground, and like a top being wound up and released on a table, you just go flying. You can also use it to clear large gaps, which is its intended use. So now we're going to come up to one of the most important parts of this, and that's getting through that door cycle incredibly early as you possibly can. Now we're going to hopefully, because of how early we got through that door cycle, we're going to hopefully make this next door cycle without getting hit, and we did. We got through it flawlessly, and that's going to allow us to do a quick little tornado there, another Mach Tornado after it, and it's going to hopefully allow our next door cycle to sync up pretty well if we didn't have triple mask. However, we do have triple mask, and we're going to be jumping over this large gap. It's insanely precise. It's incredibly difficult to do. It takes a lot of practice. I'm sorry for the cursing in the background there. And because we have the triple mask, that door will actually stay open since we can't be damaged by it. I would normally do another Mach Tornado there, but it seems like I had a little bit of a problem with it. And then we finish off the level with another one, and you could see just the big sigh of relief that just happened, because Sphinxinator, oh, what a tough level that is, and tough one to explain as well. I'm really glad that if this does get accepted as a race, I'll have people on the couch to support us in and let us kind of focus on levels like those. All right, now we go into Tomb Waiter. Like I said, Warp 4 is a gauntlet. It does not let up yet. Tell No Tales is, you know, the rough long water level. Then we got Sphinxinator. Now we got Tomb Waiter, another cycle-based level, except this time the cycles will not only potentially take away our masks, they will kill us outright. Just 100 to 0, they will absolutely take us out. Do not care about our masks. That's because these cycles are based on this lowering and rising water here. If you enter the water while it's too high, you'll instantly drown. It doesn't care about your masks at all. But the trick with the water is that if we actually are in an invulnerable mask state and the water is down, it will not rise until our mask is gone. So now we've got triple mask, and this saves 3 seconds over the course of this level to pick up this triple mask, because it allows us to do a few mock tornadoes while the water is down, this being the second one. Now there's a trick with this section here where you'll see that I kind of did some awkward movement there. It's because there's an erroneous hitbox there that will just instantly kill you sometimes, and it's incredibly annoying to deal with, so most of the runners tend to take it safe around that area. But you'll see here, because this is so cycle based, I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm floating over the water as much as I can, so that I never have to take the intended route of activating these metal platforms to stand on. This is the last room, and a tough one because you need to make sure that you clear that gap, wait just a moment, and then start up another hover, and we get to finish off with another mock tornado. And wonderful job there in the Tomb Waiter. Did I mention Warp 4 is a gauntlet? I can't remember. I think I might have, because it does not let up yet. We've got Future Frenzy right after it. Now this is luckily the end of the Warp 4 gauntlet, but this is another one. This is probably the most important level in Warp 4 to have triple mask in, to have that invulnerability in. And so it's very rough that ideally we do it after Sphinxinator and Tomb Waiter, so you have to not die in either of those levels just to get a triple mask in Future Frenzy and not lose time. Now, we have these conveyor belts that are new to us, and I mean, they work like conveyor belts in any other game. You speed up if they're going forward, you slow down if they're coming back the other way, but we can use mock tornadoes to mitigate them or add to our speed, as we did right there. We need to make sure that we stand in the center of any of these platforms that take us away like this, because unfortunately the game just requires you to stand in the center, and if you're slightly off, it'll like hop you back into the center. It's incredibly obnoxious. So we're gonna go up on top there instead of going underneath the metal grates, because you don't want to crawl. Now here's where we pick up triple mask. This allows us to plow through all of the enemies here and do a series of mock tornadoes. We unfortunately didn't get to do one there that we would normally like to do, or here it seems like we kind of forgot a little bit at this time where we wanted to do them. But here's another one. Plow through the enemies and the TNT. Mock tornadoes while in triple mask form are incredibly useful. And now we have just a series of glitch high jumps. We have some of these automatic launchers there that you just saw. Those green spinners will put you into a high jump and a death tornado spin. Do some very fancy movement there to avoid slowing down while sliding underneath the lasers. And then we're actually going to skip that auto launcher, because even though you can do a mock tornado off of it, it's about 1 second faster to skip it completely. And overall, pretty solid level. We still have 2 masks. We didn't need to take 2 masks out of that level. We actually could have lost both of them after we got the invulnerability, but it's not necessarily faster to actually damage boost with them anywhere. They're really just there for safety at that point. The reason we don't need them anymore is because luckily our gauntlet is finally over and we go into the easiest level in the run. It's like they knew that they just needed to give you a break in this warp. And so they put in this level, Bye Bye Blimps, which does take away any masks that you have. So Bye Bye Blimps, super simple, first of 2 plane levels, and all you can do is kind of shoot, move, and barrel roll. And so you're going to take out 7 blimps here, and they do not take many shots at all. So the only real speed tech here is to aim well and try to kind of have an internal timer of how long it takes to do all the shots that will completely take out a blimp before moving on. So you can see a lot of these times I'm cutting corner, I'm turning away from the blimp before it actually breaks, because I have a good feeling of like when the last bullet will have been shot and will break it. I'm gonna take a sip of water here for a moment.
Hey, what up, Shock?
Okay. So now we're coming up to the boss of Warp 4, and this is the only boss that we actually fight with Coco. You might have noticed we've been using Coco this entire warp. It just turns out that it's easier to not switch off of her here. And we're going to have to use her in the boss anyways. So this boss actually takes place in your spaceship. And it really seems like this was Naughty Dog's back in the original version. It was like their way of kind of retrying the engine fight from Crash 2. So we have all these different segments of engine that we need to break, any of these glowing yellow segments. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to take out that center one first. There's 2 segments in each phase that are a limited time only, and that's these machine guns in this phase. So whenever they show up, we want to take them out immediately. And luckily we can do so in 1 cycle each. Now it's random which shoulders will kind of flip up and win. Ideally we want them to flip up while we're shooting the machine gun for that side, because then we can aim our shots to hit the machine gun and the shoulder. We didn't get too lucky with that in this specific fight, but we're going to skip a little cutscene and head into phase 2. Now this one is even more important to take out the arms or these side pieces as soon as possible. Again, we're going to do 1 in each cycle. We then take out that bottom because it launches these obnoxious bombs constantly at you, and luckily I just detonated it there. We're now going to take out this right arm, and again, these arms, they force everything else to close, which it just makes it so much slower if you don't take them out quickly. And it looks like we did a good job with the shoulders here, so we managed to do a very good job in that second phase. And now that we've beaten that level, we've gotten access to the bazooka, which unfortunately the bazooka is not useful in this run. It is useful in the 105% speed run, but in the any percent run, it's unfortunately not. There is some really cool tech with bazookas where you can jump and pull the bazooka out at the same time, which allows you to kind of just keep shooting while moving, but unfortunately just hasn't made its way into any percent yet. So we're into our warp 5. This is our last warp, our last 5 levels of the run. The first one we're going to do is Orange Asphalt, which is the 3rd and final motorcycle level. This is one of the hardest levels to optimize. One of the hardest, like, motorcycle levels especially, but just one of the hardest levels in general to optimize, because there are so many spots in it where these enemy racers are just perfectly built to make you lose time, just to take you out. We're going to be hitting a boost pad right here, and we're going to do our best to carry this boost pad as far as possible. So we did manage to take it up past that enemy racer, but unfortunately we ran into the dirt, and running into the dirt immediately cancels any boosts. So we didn't get to carry that boost as far as possible. We're going to avoid these ramps, instead go in between them. It's not known for certain whether the ramps are slower or faster, but it's kind of assumed at this point that you shouldn't hit a ramp if you don't need to. And so that's how the assumption will be playing on here. Next, they bring a couple barricades in and try to hide a boost behind one of them. So even though it slows us down to hit the barricade, it's faster to hit the boost pad. Ideally, if that racer weren't in the way, we would have been able to carry that boost all the way down this long stretch of road that we're still on here, and finally dropped it when we're coming into this turn. It looks like we've had a lot of slowdowns here. You have to know exactly how far past the white line you can continue on at full speed, because you can go past the white line and not slow down, but if you go too far past it, it's going to slow you down very quickly, and it's something that's really hard to deal with as a runner. To note too that like most racing games, if you have one of these long boost pads going, your handling goes way down. It's your punishment, kind of, your penalty for getting a huge speed boost is you cannot turn as well, and it's been a constant problem throughout all these levels. Luckily, I mean, we didn't get to carry any boosts all that far that we wanted to, but that level wasn't too bad. We didn't get completely destroyed by any of the other racers, which could absolutely happen. Now we're going into Mad Bombers next. This is our final vehicle level, our final, quote-unquote gimmick level of the run. Both Orange Asphalt and Mad Bombers can be done either one at the beginning of the warp, one at the end of the warp, both at the beginning of the warp, or both at the end of the warp. I prefer to do them at the beginning, but you may see other runners that are submitting for this GDQ do them in a different order. And the reason for that is that they take away your masks, so you have to do them either at the beginning or the end, but you can kind of choose where you want them. So Mad Bombers, this is actually a bit more difficult than it looks. You need to have very precise aiming here because these enemy planes will turn away from you. They turn on a set pattern, but unfortunately for us, that set pattern ends up causing them to turn away from you quite a bit. So like this plane here, it turned to the left so that it would get away from us rather than towards us. So you need to have really good aim, and you have to lead the planes with your shots a lot in order to hit these engines, because you can't just hit any part of the plane. You have to hit each of the engines until it explodes. But like the other plane level, it's still pretty quick, and it can be a little nice refreshing break after some of the difficult levels in Warps 4 and 5. And there we go, we're through that level, and now we're on to only platforming levels from here on out until the boss. The first of which is Bug Light. Now this is the level that I recommend people learn mock tornadoes in. They like try them out on their own because it has a lot of hills in it. And with those mock tornadoes, you know, I mentioned you have to slide and spin and then jump and then land back on the ground. When you have a hill in front of you, you don't have to like fall back to the ground. You're just going to run into the hill when you jump. So it allows for some mock tornadoes that get caught instantly, and you'll see it happen pretty quickly here. We're going to take out this first snake first, and then we're going to land right on that hill and go flying with the mock tornado. Now Bug Light is not only interesting because of these mock tornadoes we get to do at the beginning, but also because it's a heavy triple mask level, heavy mask level in general. There's 4 in this level, and it also has these closing doors like back in SPHYNXINATOR, but this time these doors aren't on a global cycle. They actually happen, they close when you get to them, and you want to take a damage boost through that door, specifically with Coco, because with Crash he'll actually have this long animation where he gets crushed by the door, but with Coco she doesn't have that animation. So it's actually one of the few times where there's a difference between the characters. So now we have the triple mask here, and there is one more door that we really need to worry about. One more of those crusher doors that we need to worry about here. And if we're incredibly fast, if we do all these mock tornadoes perfectly, we can actually keep that door open. We can keep it, make it stay forced open, and we just did it. We just got past that door, which is very, very tight, but super cool, because normally like this one, all those doors will slam shut in your face. So now we have another hill here, which allows us to do a very quick mock tornado. I believe I take it safe here at the end of it, but you can do a few more mock tornadoes here as well, and that'll allow us to kind of finish out the level. The reason I'm taking it so safely is because we need to carry these 2 masks. Obviously we got the triple mask for free from the game. It just stacks 3 masks right there for you, but there are still a lot of hazards once you're done with it, and we need to use a triple mask in Gone Tomorrow as well. So we need to make sure that we enter with 2 masks. So, Gone Tomorrow, this is our second to last level of the run, and our second future style level. The mask for this level is, there's only one, and it's very early on. It's like really almost right away. However, there are still a few enemies in the way. I have lost a mask getting up to it before, so we'll have to kind of keep an eye out for that. There are a few spots where you want to do some mock tornadoes here. We're going to pick up the mask, and now the nice thing about this invulnerability is that these gigantic robots that are in our way are not a problem. We just get them out of here with mock tornadoes and slide spinning. And so we kind of messed up the mock tornado there a little bit. We should have started a bit earlier. Same with this one, but we were still able to get almost all the way to the, you know, I'm not sure what you would call this pad. It's not like a teleporter pad. It's not an elevator or anything, but for all intents and purposes, it's an elevator in terms of, you know, gaming logic. So we picked up our crystal there. An easy one to miss, actually, just due to the way that it blends into the background a bit. And now we actually don't need the remaining masks that we have. And there you can see I just lost one, and I lost the second one as well. We ideally don't want to lose both of them that quickly, because there are some scary sections that we would rather, you know, have Ooh, wow. We'd rather have some masks for safety. As you can see there, I had to kind of react very quickly to some problems that were happening. One of the other reasons we don't really want to lose our masks that early is we would like to have one for this section so that we don't have to wait on those lasers. We can just kind of go and hope that they're on a good cycle. But the reason we don't need any of the masks is because Flaming Passion, our final level of the run, has no masks in it. So there's no chance for a triple mask strat, and there are no real damage boosts that are super useful in that level anyways. We are now coming up to it though, Flaming Passion, and this is one of the hardest platforming levels in the run. It's right up there, one of the hardest levels in the run. It's up there with Deep Trouble and SPHYNXINATOR, and it's just super difficult. It's incredibly easy to die on, more than just, you know, take a hit, which is sometimes all you're looking at as a punishment in some of the other levels. It's really easy to die because there are a lot of pits and just a lot of hazards, and like I said, there are no masks in the level. And as soon as you die once, you're on the death cycle instead of the normal load-in cycle, and that just makes things a lot more awful. There is a carpet cycle we want to try to hit later in this level as well, so all of my movement so far has to have been very quick, has to have been very specific. I'm going to skip the metal bouncy boxes when we can. And now here's where we want to hit a carpet cycle. We want to land on that carpet up above, and we just barely made it, but then unfortunately we weren't able to land all the way up onto this trampoline, skipping some of the platforming sections. So we ended up one cycle behind on the carpet, but ideally you make that one cycle earlier. We have to kind of react now to some of the carpets and stuff. Do a cool little strat there where we bounce off the checkpoint box. Fun little fact, that was actually designed by a viewer. A viewer actually suggested, hey, why don't you bounce off that box and jump over the enemy, and it was like, wow, that actually worked out really well.
World record's gone, but we're alive.
So finish the level. Now this run, I'll go ahead and spoil it a little bit before we finish through the boss fight. This run is actually 3 seconds off of the world record at the time. It's now currently, at time of recording, 4 seconds off the world record, because the world record was improved by 1 second. So a race between the top 3 racers would be insanely close. It'd be super cool. The actual real time difference is more than 4 seconds, but that's just due to the fact that there is a loading difference between console models, and we'll be making sure that if we are accepted, everyone will be on the same console model, same hard drive type, and we do time this game loadless in order to, help each other compare. So this is the final boss fight, Cortex, and unfortunately it has this kind of par for the course for Crash speedruns. The final boss is a little bit of a buzzkill. It's just a little, it's not too intense. It does feel intense while you're playing it, but there's not much we can do to speed it up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I like to just have a little fun and do some mock tornadoes while I'm waiting. Now, the one thing to note about this boss fight, though, is that Aku and Uka, the 2 masks, whenever they are in these 3 phases, they move in a predictable pattern. However, when Cortex is throwing mines out right before you can hit him, those are actually random, where they'll land on the battlefield. And they have a very large hitbox when they explode. So you have to make sure you avoid them completely. So even though you can hit Cortex when he's as far left as his shield drops, a lot of the times you're going to be hitting him more in the center of the stage, just due to having to avoid mines.
I'm not looking at chat.
As you can hear us trying to make sure I didn't die. I have died several times in this fight before. It's pretty easy to not pay attention and suddenly take a quick death, but luckily this is generally a victory lap with just a few second variation of RNG for most runners once they get to this point. But as you can see, the mines, he's throwing them all the way up at us again, and that's actually not too bad, having him throw them completely at you. What you really don't want is for him to drop them right in front of himself. Then the power-up drops in a seemingly random location, and we hit time as soon as we enter that warp. So this was a pretty solid run. It was a deathless run as well. I would hope to have a deathless run in a marathon. However, you know, it's a marathon run. You can't exactly say what happens. You can tell that, you know, I got a 58.51 in this run. I'm just going to pause the video. I got a 58.51 in this run. I believe that all three of the potential racers are going to be submitting this with a 1 hour and 5 minute estimate. So we're going to have a pretty generous estimate. And that is to kind of account for if somebody just has a real tough time and loses one of the bike races, or you know, just something like that happens. They just take a lot of deaths places. We still will cover that in our estimate. We want to make sure that you guys stay on schedule and everything. So I hope you enjoyed this run. I know it was a lot of me talking. My throat is now killing me, so I'm probably going to give it a little bit of a break. But I think it's one of the coolest runs to come out of 2017. Mock Tornadoes are just amazing speed tech. It's difficult to do consistently, but easy to do once. You know, easy to kind of teach someone, which is everything you want in your speed tech, in my opinion. And the level variety just shakes things up. There's not a single level that we can't speed up in some format, and I just think that lends it fantastically for a GDQ run. I've been JHobz, and I am submitting this race with Roach and Rico, although we have all agreed that, you know, if you decide to take it as an individual, that's perfectly fine as well. As I said, my PB as of current time is 58.51 real time, which is a 48.44, I believe, loadless time. 48.43, 4 seconds off of the world record. And hopefully even by the time you watch this, the world record will be changing hands back and forth. It's been a very fun, constant battle. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you all at AGDQ 2018.